Good afternoon. I'm Ernest Bower from CSIS Southeast Asia Program, and I'm here with Singapore's Ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Chan Heng Chee. Ambassador Chan, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and welcome to CSIS.
Thank you for the invitation, Ernie.
I'd like to ask about the U.S.-Singapore relationship. It's a relationship that I think most people understand is quite good. We have two treaty allies in ASEAN, Thailand and the Philippines, but a lot of people say the U.S.-Singapore relationship goes beyond that. What's the perspective from Singapore?
Well, Singapore has a substantive and warm relationship with the United States. We are not a treaty ally, but the United States often refers to us as our ally, Singapore. I say that, we're more than a friend and less than a treaty ally. In 2005, Singapore signed the Strategic Framework Agreement with the United States, and we were known as the MSCP, which is the Major Security Cooperation Partner. And since then, we've been trying to define what that could mean, trying to push the parameters. I think we share major strategic perspectives with the United States. We're an outspoken friend and ally, and the United States has always sort of found Singapore very articulate about the U.S. presence in the region. We say what we believe, and if we think the United States presence is a very good thing, we say so, and where we see the United States not doing the things it ought to do, we will say so too.
Great. Well, I want to get into both those areas when we go further. But before I do that, we're on the eve of Secretary Clinton arriving in Hanoi with your Foreign Minister George Yeo and the other ASEAN countries, foreign ministries and partners for the ASEAN Regional Forum. Mm-hmm. The word is that the U.S. is about to seek to sign up to the East Asian Summit, but Singapore has done a lot of thinking about regional architecture. Could you comment on that? What's Singapore's views on Asian regional architecture, both in the security and the trade area?
Singapore welcomes the engagement of the United States in the region, and we support U.S. engagement. We support the United States seeking to join EAS. We have told the United States so. We have always wanted the U.S. in the region and worked with the United States and other partners in the region to find suitable forums to keep the U.S. engaged in the region. We began, as you know, with ARF. Right. After the Cold War, to keep the United States in the region, and also to create a forum where the United States and China can talk to each other. Then from ARF, we went to APEC actually, and that was a trade forum that brought both sides of the Pacific together. Now, besides the ARF and APEC, we have launched the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is another way of bringing America back into the game in a region where so many trade agreements, FTAs, have been signed by different members in the region, and this is a good thing. Now, EAS is a grouping of 10 ASEAN countries and plus 6, originally. That's EAS, and the 6 include India, Australia, New Zealand, China, Korea, Japan. The United States is not in it, and has, with the Obama administration coming into office, officials have expressed a desire to be part of the EAS. Singapore would like the U.S. to be engaged in our regional architecture, and we were thinking of different kinds of forums that would make this easier, and we've always said to the United States, EAS is fine, if you wanted to think of a different forum, that's fine too, and the U.S. has said, well, we'd like to join EAS, and we support the United States there.
The EAS will include economics as well as security. Is that correct?
In the intention of EAS, it was politics, economics, as well as security questions. And so humanitarian disaster relief was one of the issues. When EAS was formed, we said we would also look at terrorism, questions of maritime security. I think we haven't got to that part yet, but yes, that would be part of the agenda.
And then I want to follow up on this and ask for your views. And I know this is being developed, so but you've studied these issues for a long time and been an actor, a primary actor in many of them. For APEC, if the EAS summit takes place and if the Americans join, that would be the 10 ASEAN plus 8, I understand.
Yes, because Russia would be there. Russia wants to join, right. And we would probably, we would take in the United States and so Russia. That's my understanding.
That would entail an annual leaders summit.
Yes.
Do you have a view on whether will APEC survive EAS? Could the leaders reasonably meet in both forums at the head of state?
APEC will definitely survive after an expanded EAS. To begin with, EAS plus 6 or plus 8 does not include the Latin countries. And APEC brings two sides of the Pacific and the Latin countries into a grouping. I think one of the most appreciated fact about APEC is how much APEC has done as a trade forum. I know there are many APEC skeptics, but would you, for instance, be surprised if I told you that since APEC has been formed in the last 15 years or so, the average tariffs of APEC has come down 2/3. Average tariff in 1989, when it was formed, was like 17%. Today, the average tariff in the region of APEC, 21 economies, is about 5%. So that's 2/3 of the tariffs down. Also, intra-APEC trade, merchandise trade, has gone up, by about 8% a year, every year. We began with about $2 trillion in trade amongst the APEC countries. Today is $9 trillion. So something has happened. Plus, out of APEC, many FTAs were formed. They are all APEC countries. That's what's common to the FTAs in the region. They are APEC members. So I would not, so quickly sound the death knell of APEC. And APEC is different from EAS.
Okay, thank you for that. I do want to segue to trade. Singapore's always been a leader on trade, and it's not surprising given the trade dependency of Singapore's economy, or the dependency on trade in Singapore's economy. But from your perspective, what are the most important trends on trade globally? WTO, APEC, FTAs that you've participated in the region, either directly or through ASEAN?
One of the things I am most concerned about is rising protectionism in the world, especially given the downturns, of severe recession in the United States, and Europe is in trouble as well. G20 countries met and pledged in London that they would restrain, and put a stop to protectionism. Promptly after the G20 meeting, more than half of the G20 countries brought in protectionist measures. And APEC also tries to, document what are the protectionist measures that have been introduced. So many countries have these binational type of, provisions. Is in legislation. It creeps in. I'm concerned about that. And, we hope to try to reverse that sort of trend. Now, APEC is supposed to do this. We'll try to restrain this. One thing that we can do, and I would like to see happen, is that Doha should pick up. I know at the Toronto summit recently, Doha G20, Doha was discussed, and I gather the U.S. President Obama, made a big push to get Doha started again. Singapore, as a trading nation, as you say, is of course very interested in seeing Doha move. But we are not the main player, you know. It depends on the other major economies. And with Doha not moving, you know, that's why we are quite a leader in using regional free FTAs and bilateral FTAs to give a push to trade. So you will find in trade trends, protectionism there, efforts to start Doha, and meanwhile regional trade agreements to try to give it a push. I think there are many free trader economies, nations in the world, and we want to keep this going. And that's what many in the Asia Pacific are trying to do.
Is it true that the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was sort of an outgrowth of the P4 and P5 efforts that Singapore had thought up much earlier?
Well, I would say Singapore and a few others. It was 2006 actually. Singapore, Chile, New Zealand, and Brunei, 4 smaller economies in the Asia Pacific. We found APEC very slow, and we thought if we could just give it a push for liberalization, trade liberalization, that would be good. And it's now proven to be really a very good move, because out of P4 we are creating a larger group, and it is P8 or TPP as it is now called. And the TPP, or the Trans-Pacific Partnership, of which the United States has signed on, is going to be the building block towards liberalization of trade, opening up of new markets in the Asia Pacific region, in the APEC region. And that's a wonderful vision.
How's the TPP going? There's been 2 rounds of negotiations. Do you have a sense of momentum or a time frame?
Well, I think there is, because with the United States hosting APEC in 2011, that's a very nice timeline. And if we want something to show, that's a deliverable for 2011 in Hawaii. So far, as you rightly said, there have been 2 meetings. An intersessional is planned in August in Peru. There's going to be another meeting in Brunei in October. That makes it about 4 meetings, and that's very good. So things are moving on, and I do hope the momentum keeps up.
When we talk about TPP and the 8 members there, neither of Asia's real giants are members of that. And I wondered, those giants, of course, being India and China. Could you say a word about China and India's growing influence in Asia, and what you think that means for Singapore, and also any advice you have for the United States in that regard?
Well, China is a rising economy, is a rising economic power. Every newspaper you pick up reports on that, and is creating some consternation in many quarters. And I think it is the pace it moves is breathtaking. China is today the number 1 trading partner of many countries in Asia. Japan, Hong Kong, economies I should say. Japan, the Taiwan economy, the Hong Kong economy, Australia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, Korea. Is quite major. For Singapore, it was the 3rd largest trading partner, it's now become 2nd, pipping the United States. So the economic presence of China is really felt. And with that, I think, you will see China exerting more soft power influence and influence elsewhere. So that is a new phenomenon. India is also growing and is a major power. Singapore has long seen India as the other wing of Singapore's growth. Tapping onto the China growth was one wing. Tapping onto the Indian growth was the other wing for Singapore's growth. And I think it has worked. You would have heard that our growth rate for 2010 has been forecasted. And we've just said that we would do between 13 to 15% this year. Now, mind you, this is after 2 years of very slow growth. So we must take this 13 to 15% in perspective, you know. That's what my political leaders keep telling the people of Singapore. Don't get too excited. Yes, you know, because, and next year won't be the same. But they are good figures.
Absolutely.
And I think it has to do with the growth in the region, with China, with India. And it won't just be Singapore. I think you will see our regional countries also revising their growth figure upwards, because if Singapore does well, we do well because the region does well. And that's always been the case. So I will see some, you know, you can count on seeing some revision of growth figures too. But it's China's growth, India's growth, and very much, you know, the United States as well, you know, and we see the US as playing a very important role and will continue to play that role.
When you consider China and India and sort of comparing them from a Southeast Asian perspective, is it true that at least to date, that the Chinese have been more focused on Southeast Asia, more sort of forward deployed than the Indians? And do you think that might change if you look out a decade?
I think it is true that the Chinese have been more focused on Southeast Asia, on the Asia Pacific.
Yeah.
India has always said it's looking east, you know, it's looking east. But as the senior minister Goh Chok Tong went to India, you know, he said, yes, India should stop looking east but doing something about the east. You know. I think, you know, India, of course, has a very important problem on the west. So, you know, sometimes I say India is looking west. It wants to look east, but it looks west. You know, and it's got border problems. There's Afghanistan, there's Pakistan, there's Kashmir. So, you know, I can understand why, you know, immediately it is not focused on Southeast Asia.
Right. Switching gears here, you have been one of the most fabulous ambassadors that Washington has ever seen. Not least among the ASEAN ambassadors, where you've been a real leader. And I wonder if you could, sometimes it's hard for Americans or any country to sort of see themselves, and the best way to do that is through a friend's eyes. And since you've been here for some time, could you talk a little bit about your experience as Singapore ambassador to the United States? I think you were also in New York before you came to Washington, so it's been some time. And then any advice you might have for other ambassadors from Southeast Asia who may be coming in as new diplomats here?
You know, coming from Singapore, we're the little red dot. Singapore is an island state, city-state. So sometimes it's hard for Americans to grasp where Singapore is, what is Singapore, and we're mistaken often to be, Singapore is in China, and I say, no, Singapore is not in China. And Singapore and Senegal, sometimes I get people confused, you know. But, and my Thai colleague used to say, Thailand, Taiwan is all the same. So, you know, Southeast Asia is a niche. ASEAN is a niche, and getting ASEAN projected is something we have to do. And we're fighting for mind share all the time. And America, you know, is a big country, and your interests are global. And there are regions which are white heat regions and call for attention much more. The Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, you know. And you look at the big countries, China, Russia, you know. So we understand. So for an ambassador from a small country coming to the United States, you know, the capital of the most powerful country in the world, and I think still the most powerful economy in the world, and you really have to, you know, recover from this bad spell, is how to get your attention for us coming here. And we do our best. It's not easy for Americans, I think, but I think Americans, because of what you are and who you are expected. More is expected from you. You are expected to do so much. And you should keep doing what you are doing. And do much. And you will be appreciated. For my colleagues coming in, It's hard work. You know, people tell me, oh, you're a diplomat, you're an ambassador, you're going to Washington.
Right.
All these parties, all these cocktail parties. It's hard work being an ambassador. It's not just cocktail parties. And you work at cocktail parties.
Right.
And America is a big country, many levels of power. And so a new ambassador coming in must be high on energy and must be willing to engage.
Well, you certainly have been both of those, and I personally have really learned a lot from you and enjoyed your leadership here. So thank you for talking with us today. I hope to have you back.
You're too kind.
Very often, and
Yes.
thank you for speaking at CSIS.
Thank you. Thank you.